Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Um, this is Vikram again, and I'm sorry to call you all on Christmas Eve for today's session. Sorry, just one moment, please. हेलो हेलो हाय आशीष. हाँ जी, मैंने लॉग इन कर लिया है. जी 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 जी, थैंक यू. Good afternoon, everyone. So today, again, to carry forward our discussion on sales team management, we will. What I intend to do is to do 1 hour of maybe split up some time. We've almost finished all the study material. So we'll just do the last few slides of the study material, and most of our time we will devote on the exercises that we had sort of shared with you. I'll be working out with you, and we'll be thinking about how, and I'll also invite your suggestions about how you have managed to do the exercises and your thoughts. So feel free to come in, and it would be a very enriching discussion. So let's begin um, the final stretch of the study material. We have at this point in time already discussed about the composition of the team, and we have discussed about how to get the most out of your team. Now, what we are thinking of the today, we are only thinking of discussing how to incentivize your people to perform a job very well. So today, the first thing is that there are two types of incentives that you can provide to your team. The first one is a monetary incentive, which is, as the word is simple, is related to money. The second type of incentive that you can give to your team is so monetary incentives could be, for example, if you hire a person, it could be a promise of a job. If he's already in your team, it could be bonuses or other financial incentives. It could be specific reward programs for individuals based on individual targets. Non-monetary would be very suitable for incentivizing or people who are relatively junior in the organization. When I say junior, it could mean that you have just started off your career and you are looking to have some training overseas or exposure in a specific job, uh, something like that. So, by promising that you will, as a manager, allow your juniors to go on such training programs for intense training for their own personal development or their career development, these are in fact the most sort of important non-monetary incentives at a young age, which have to be thought about. We had discussed, but I'll repeat now, the feeling of being part of a team that succeeds. This is a very big non-monetary incentive where you as a manager inspire all your co-workers and your juniors to have a strong view of what you want to achieve. They all start to believe in it, and there is a unity of purpose, which means we have defined a purpose and we go out and try and achieve it as all together as a team. I don't know if you have all had the time to look at one of the videos I had played in the first class, which was about one of the test pilots talking about his experience in the uh, light combat aircraft project. This is also a feeling of unity of purpose where everybody gives their very best to perform well and so that the team succeeds. Um, Another example that we had discussed was 2 to 300 surveyors of Dainik Bhaskar beginning their morning every morning, coming meeting at 6 o'clock in the morning. You can just imagine that if it's a winter morning, how driven or how well they had motivated their staff, that they would come out in the morning and they would talk about what they want to achieve during the day. They would all feel together. All of these things are what we had discussed as being a unity of purpose. Um, so we spoke about the fact that the supervisors closely monitored the success, the failure of the team. So, on a day to day basis, the managers were helping the staff to groom their responses, how to handle situations better. Um, if they had temporary failures the next day, look over it and feel better the next morning. uh, and if there were some behavioral aberrations, maybe for example a staff lost his temper on the field, or there was some uh, untoward happening, all of these the managers had to look into it, and they could mold the team into a one single unit that could perform. All of these things act as non-monetary sort of guidances and incentives for young people. So I would say, if you have, when you're a senior person in your organization and you're designing your own sales team, you have to look at having a lot of people who are from different varied backgrounds, uh, having different capabilities, and make sure that all of them, even though they may be inspired by different requirements, that they are incentivized to perform together for the team. Some will respond better to monetary incentives, and others will respond to non-monetary incentives. So we have spoken about um, various things that were done by the Dainik Bhaskar team for incentivizing their people. A lot of incentivization, in fact, is non-monetary, and non-monetary in some ways works even better than a money incentive. Uh, so you just have to figure out कि आपके team members को what is it that inspires them, what is it that they personally want to achieve, and go out and, as a manager, facilitate them to achieve that through, and align it with the corporate's interests. So we had also spoken about some element of fun. Uh, it's very it's in the case of Dainik Bhaskar, they arranged parties with celebrities. So if you achieved your targets, you may have Sachin Tendulkar come in, or you may have Amitabh Bachchan come in, and these are all the non-monetary type of incentives that were provided. Then we come down to what are the typical compensation plans that companies adopt to incentivize their staff. So there are basically, in fact, three types. The first one is a fixed plan. The second one is a pure variable plan, and we'll come to the third type. So a fixed plan of compensation would mean that the company gives you a fixed salary no matter what, whether you perform well or you don't perform well, your salary will be fixed. Now, in this case, a good example of a fixed plan compensation would be government employees. So they are receiving a fixed salary from the government, and in some ways, you could say that maybe they are, because they're receiving a fixed income, they may not feel very sort of um, incentivized to go out, and like customer satisfaction may not be very important for them, because if you are a government servant, irrespective of the number of people that you serve, you're still receiving the same fixed salary. Or if you serve your customers very well or badly, both ways, then you will still receive the fixed sort of salary. What are the advantages of a fixed plan? It would help the company to forecast its costs very accurately. It'll avoid revenue disputes. What I mean by revenue disputes is, for example, if you are working on a project together with your partners and you were to receive the contract from your client, and you are also counting that as revenue for the work that you have done, and your partners may also be counting it. So under whose account will this thing be booked? For example, if you're working in a for a client, maybe Tata Steel, and there may be some services that your team provides to Tata Steel, but there may be other services another team provides. Overall, your company wins, but how will you distinguish the revenue between your two divisions? So, with a fixed plan, it avoids the revenue disputes because now the company has received the revenue and both parties have to perform both departments have to perform their job towards it. Now, with the fixed plan, some good things. I mean, we spoke about the fact that you can have good after sales service or you may have bad after sales service. Another good way to think about it is that you can have good sales service because after sales support, because you may be doing some work for your clients. You have got the contract, and um, after that you can focus all your attention towards doing good after sales service rather than trying to look for a new client all the time. So with the fixed plan, once you have got a client on board, you can focus all your effort towards good service. Again, the fact that you avoid revenue disputes means that you facilitate teamwork. Now let's look at the variable plan. A variable plan will mean that आपको as salespersons you will receive uh, uh, your financial sort of reimbursement or your financial as a percentage of the sales that you generate. So, for example, for every maybe insurance policy sold, or every newspaper sold, or every subscription sold, you will receive maybe 10 to 15% of the amount that you sold. So what this does is that it maximizes sales production activity. In this case, the sales staff will not look at trying to provide good customer after sales service. They are only interested in trying to find the next client to enroll. A lot of these variable plans we see, for example, if you are trying to sell a gym membership, so you would have people who are selling gym memberships, and you will have the staff inside a gym that will provide after sales service. So in this case, the division of responsibility becomes very clear between new salespeople and service people. Now, in this case, the good thing for the company is that the activities are completely aligned in terms of revenue generation for the company. The other advantage is that it attracts only the most aggressive sales staff because they feel that they can do a good job. And for people who feel a little bit less confident than them, they will prefer to have a fixed sales plan. The downside of a variable plan, as you guessed, is that it could have lower customer retention and lower after sales service. So another thing is any activities that are non-revenue activities would have less support. So finally, what do we say would be a good plan? So our feeling is generally we've seen around some textbooks suggest that usually a good sales plan would involve 60% of fixed, which helps the staff to pay for their day-to-day bills, look after their families, etc., and a 40% variable plan. So let us discuss about bonuses. Um, Bonuses are based on um, they are based on companies' budgets. So, which means that you can decide to say that bonuses will be given out if we perform sales up to a certain uh, dollar or a rupee denominated number. तो हम ये कहते हैं कि अगर ये बजट अचीव होता है या और एक्सीड होता है, ओनली देन बोनसेस विल बी गिवन आउट. Bonuses are required, are given out especially in companies where there is a very significant need for growth. So if you are a new startup, or if you are a company in a big growing market, you will have bonuses, and very strong sort of bonuses. Bonuses are also dependent on revenue and profit overall, which means that you meet the revenue targets and you also meet the overall profit targets, or the company meets, which means costs have also been uh, kept in control. Finally, sorry, variable bonuses help the territories. Maybe if you're in, say, um, different zones, they help the territories to get to the maximum potential. Uh, what I mean by that is that, for example, if you were to incentivize the staff to say that if you were to meet a certain minimum sales, then beyond the fixed amount that we have paid out, uh, they will help all the territories to do their best to achieve the variable bonus that was kept aside. Um, Variable bonuses also help to determine the tenure of salesperson, and what I mean by that is कि typically, for example, bonuses are could be given out either as a staggered bonus or a bonus at the end of the year. So, for example, if a person has worked throughout the year with the company and bonuses are granted only in, say, March, then maybe if it's November or December, he might get a sales offer, but a job offer, but he's not likely to change during that time because he's looking at receiving his variable bonus sometime in the near future. So in some ways, some other companies also even give the bonuses over a period of 3 or 4 years. So they give you, say, for example, 25% of the bonus that was agreed on for year one, 25% for year two, etc. So it encourages the salespersons to sort of be loyal to the company that has employed them. So there are some additional thoughts on how compensation plans could be structured. So we could say that we eliminate caps on compensation but freeze base salaries. This is a good way to encourage staff to do a lot of sales activities, which means that you freeze a base salary. The fixed component is frozen, so आपको given more than that amount नहीं मिलने वाला, and you get there's no cap on the upside that you can earn. So then you will do a lot of sales activities, try and get new clients in to get higher variable bonuses. Then we considered as a sales manager, what you can do is you can adjust the base salary to a minimum cost of living, which means that you suggest to your company that we should pay our sales staff a certain minimum amount which is tied down to the city in which they are living. For example, if it's Mumbai, which may be far more expensive than Pune, which is close by, or if you are staying in Hyderabad, which may be far more expensive than, say, um, a city which is more interior in Andhra. Similarly, I mean, now it's, for example, Gurgaon may be considered to be more expensive than New Delhi, etc. So you tie down the base salary to a minimum cost of living, and that would be your fixed salary. Um, it is also very important to incentivize all the people, young to old, to have similar compensation plans. What I mean by this is not that everyone receives the same amount of money, but we talk about the fact that the overall structure of the plan is the same for all people. So it may, like we discussed, you can have a 60% fixed salary and a 40% variable salary. The amounts could vary depending on the seniority and the number of years that people have spent with this organization. Then we discussed about how incentives given out should be based on an objective criteria. So objective criteria would mean that have you received a certain amount of new clients in terms of number. You may receive a certain amount of new business in terms of dollar or rupee numbers. You could have, basically you should have an objective criteria, which means that the criteria itself can be answered in a very sort of impartial and clear way as to whether the criteria has been met or it hasn't been met. Um, then we always consider that getting new business is always much harder than renewal or repeat business. So any marketing person who is getting new business should receive therefore a higher incentive rather than renewal or repeat business. So I next come down to compensation governance, and what I mean by that is that when you lay down a, a, re, a compensation plan for your employees, you have to be very clear about the compensation plan, and it should be sorry, just one. Sorry. Um, um, we spoke about compensation governance. Governance means that there is a set of rules for all the employees, and we follow this set of rules very clearly across the board for all employees. So we clarify who is eligible and who and when to receive variable bonuses. There are very clear formulae for compensations and split commissions. So um, uh, these formulas are laid out, and they are, and everyone understands them and is willing to follow them. We also speak about that compensation. For example, when we spoke about two different teams servicing the same client, you may have one team saying that we bought the account and another team saying that we are responsible for a lot of servicing of the client. So um, we'll have to decide about how the compensation for both the teams is split up between the two teams inside the company, and who is going to help resolve these disputes and who makes the final decision. Um, then we speak about these are all parts of compensation governance. So it means that there has to be a written document saying that all of these are the touch points that we are saying we will agree upon, and on the basis of this Commissions will be paid maybe quarterly or annually, monthly, whatever the case may be. Then we also speak about whether and under what circumstance the compensation plan can be discontinued or changed. So we don't want to be in a situation where a employee has worked hard for 11 months and then the company changes the compensation plan maybe in December and the employee is left high and dry. These sort of things will have a very negative impact on the sales staff and their morale. So all of these things, they need to be documented and the company needs to follow a procedure. Um, One of the things that is very important is what happens when salespeople decide to leave the company, either to join a competitor or for personal reasons, or they are asked to leave. So when they are asked to leave the company, it is very clear that that person will not be getting their variable bonus. Now, if they are leaving for their personal reasons, but they have worked hard through the 11 months, they have had to leave under some circumstances. Maybe somebody is getting married and moving to a different location, or uh, somebody's family has had a situation where they have to go back and look after their parents, etc. So then the company should take a more benevolent view and pay the person their rightful bonus, so that the person will at some point in time feel motivated enough to feel that the company was had been fair to him. Now, in the event that the person leaves to join a competitor, this sort of situation, again, the company should document under what circumstances the people will receive their variable bonuses or not. Another aspect is when salespeople will be receiving their bonus, depending on how the company performs its act towards its customers. Now, will it be when the business is booked itself, when the product is shipped, the service is performed, or the invoice is settled? What I mean by this is, take for example a person who's working as a sales manager for maybe a shipbuilder. Now, in this case, what will typically happen is that the salesperson goes and he engages with the customer, and the customer gives them the order for shipbuilding or maybe software development. In this case, the first thing that will happen is that the first activity would be that the business is booked, that you bought in a client. Now, maybe if the software is being developed over a period of number of years, you will have milestones during which the contract you are doing some little pieces of work and sending out to the client. They are accepting your work. But that's not the complete software. So this process can carry on for 2 to 3 years. Now, under those circumstances, when will the salespeople receive their bonuses? As the product or the service was shipped to the client, or the service was performed, or at the final stage when the biggest sort of invoice was settled. So basically, the company should have very clear policies about how they are going out and going to compensate their employees. Um, Here's another very interesting example. Some client comes on board and we have sold the service to them. Uh, Initially, maybe 80% of the contract has gone off well, and we have been receiving our related bonus from the company as well. What would happen if, let's say, the last 20% the customer failed to pay for the product or the service? And how would the sales staff be compensated or uh, not compensated. So you could have a situation where the service team did not perform their job well, and therefore at that point in time the client said, I'm not paying for the last 20% of the service that you were supposed to render, and I'm moving my account to somebody else. In this case, the sales staff can feel very aggravated that he has performed his job and the company itself did not perform the job that was expected of them, and therefore he's not receiving his bonus. So these are some of the aspects of compensation governance. Now we come to compensation plans and how to know that whether you've got a right compensation plan for your staff or not. So the first test is that you read out, you give out the compensation plan, and generally speaking, everybody has the same compensation plan, but not exactly the same compensation numbers as such. Then you explain the overall plan to your team, and everyone understands it. The first test is that everyone understood it. So, when will I get paid my bonus? When the service is performed and the client has settled the bill. Okay, I understand it. Or how frequently will I receive my bonuses? Every quarter, every month, or every year. So, again, we have to bring clarity in this matter. So the moment you explain your plan and everyone understands it, step one of the test is already over. Step two is that the majority of your sales team will find the compensation plan to be fair. So if you ask them, do you think that this is the way we are planning to compensate you for your efforts? Do you think this is okay? And if most of them find the overall planning to be fair, then I think you've done a good job. And finally, the final test will be that sales revenues, which were at a given amount last year, may actually go up, say in March or April the next year. And another interesting point is that your top performing salespeople decide to stay with you year on year. That means they have surely receiving job offers, but have decided to turn down the job offers and decided to stick with your company. So that was all about compensation governance and compensation management. These are all tools for incentivizing your staff. We had discussed this strategy a little bit earlier, which is that for any sales team, their results will be along. We can put it in an acronym, which is motivate. You motivate your employees, and you align or set their targets, or you assign their territories, and then you expect them to perform, which means that you give each and everyone a specific role that they have to perform. But generally your zonal teams or your regional teams are given specific goals or targets that they have to meet. So this is what I call map, which means that you motivate them, you align their interests, and you leave them alone to perform their job. So finally, we will very soon go into reviewing the ICICI Lombard case study that we had discussed. But these are some of the ideas that I would like to lay out before all of you. And I would like you to think about all of these case studies, and depending on the field that you are currently interning with or what you want to do in future, you may think about all of these as interesting case studies. And the reason I'm putting these out to you is because I feel that the world is changing and India is changing very rapidly, and you may sort of bear these in mind. So one example that I had in mind was the idea of sports marketing. So we have all seen over the last 5 6 years that so much sport has come into India, because pehle we might have used to have only maybe 1 day cricket or 5 day cricket, or maybe T20 is also a very recent phenomena over the last 3 4 years. But now you have so much sports marketing, so you may consider, if you're interested in any of these you areas, you can consider these as, do some case studies, read about them, read how they are going out and sort of reaching out to different parts of India and creating a league. For example, we may discuss about the cricket is popular all across India. We understand that, but maybe the sales of the Kabaddi League, as to why it's so big on television. There are teams from, maybe from Bihar, from Bombay, from Delhi, well, different regions in the country, and they are all performing, uh, like, they are traveling from one place to the other. How are sales of those tickets happening? Are they happening via agents? Are they happening through fixed salaried employees who are given sales targets to sell these tickets to corporates? You can think about all these things. So, sports marketing is a very interesting field that you can consider to carve your career into. That is one option. Uh, One case study that we have discussed and we will be discussing today is insurance. We have seen a lot of insurance companies come out and do their IPOs, and that is why this particular company was chosen. Then you may consider looking at a lot of upcoming corporates. What I mean by those is that there are many corporates that are now very, very attractive. Maybe, for example, sorry, please, I have a question here. Please, uh, how to, could you repeat the question, Najmuddin? I was talking about upcoming corporates. So there, I mean, from maybe 3 or 4 years back, we had not heard of companies like Ola, Uber, um, Snapdeal, Flipkart. Uh, how to improve the compensation? So I think, would that be compensation? I sort of understand what you're saying, Najmuddin. I think the idea, I will take you back to one of the slides that we have discussed. And I think that as young people who are joining the industry, I think the best way to improve compensation for all of yourselves is to look at this slide very carefully. And I go back to incentives. I would say that all of you are right now in productivity through compensation. I understand, Shubham. Thank you. So I feel, I'm coming exactly to this point. I feel that the best way to improve that is that we should focus a lot on the non-monetary incentives for when we are young, which means attend a lot of training programs, skill yourself in many different ways, perform difficult projects, feel confident about yourself, add a lot of skills, uh, and uh, really become part of whichever team that you have been assigned to, or whichever team that you are assigned. तो अगर आप ये सब करेंगे, आई थिंक the non-monetary part will automatically lead to very high monetary incentives in future. So I think none of these things come easy, but I would say as youngsters, you should all be focusing on this side of the incentivization as of now. So I will just go back to I'm just coming back to where we had left off. So we spoke about different upcoming corporates in India and how things are changing. So one of the things that we spoke about was multi-brand retailers online, even taxi companies. Then we are speaking about consumer products, companies like Patanjali, uh, maybe cycle brand Agarbatti, things like that. Then I would say there are a lot of very good companies on the personal care or services. Companies that are doing very well. Kaya Skin Clinic is doing very well. Very many hair and beauty salons have come up. Some of them are chains. So these are all examples of how things are changing and how you as salespeople can mold yourself uh, to be attractive to these companies and work with them and learn and improve as you go along. So one final bit that I spoke about was India's changes, and again, you always have to think about how business is changing and how you, if you were to be appointed in one of these companies, how would you um, perform your job very well. So one example is very in the last 10 years, very many big malls were built out. But with the coming of the of Amazon or Snapdeal or Flipkart, a lot of the product sales have gone out of malls and is moving online. So if you were to be appointed as the sales manager for a mall, which means that it's your job to go out and find tenants who will take up the mall shops and sell products or services from there. How would you go out and do it? How will you inspire your team to uh, to do this difficult job? So we have to think about all these things all the time. And I've left some thoughts for you, which was, for example, a mall which was basically only for selling products, maybe rebranded and remarketed, not as a simply for selling clothes or jewelry or things like that. But now it's in fact an overall entertainment destination. So you could have a good mix of tenants in terms of gyms so that people come regularly there, food courts, play areas. A lot of these things are happening around us. We just have to be aware of it and then apply our mind. And all of these things, अगर आप ध्यान से सोचें, require, if you're a sales team manager, you will have very many different people working with you with different skill sets, different ideas. You will have to absorb all their ideas and bring out their best. So this is why I had put this slide out. Finally, just some sayings for all of you to read. One of them, these are all leadership related, and I'm sure you can all read them. But I thought that they are applicable for youngsters like you joining companies. And one of them that is very important for me as such is the last one, which is leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. So agar if you're leading your team and you have to keep your um, be learning from your juniors as well, because they are coming fresh, they have new ideas, and you will always find that if you're a leader, you have to be a little bit ahead of competition. So you have to always keep learning and always be positive. So there is some final sort of suggestions, and then after this we will move to the ICICI Lombard case study that we have discussed. The first one is that when you go on a sales call to meet your clients, I would strongly recommend that you listen very carefully. You should not ever interrupt what your client is about to say. And don't always assume that you know what the other person was about to say. Let him complete it, and you may then say that I completely agree with you, or I was just about to say that, things like that. So don't assume that you know what the other person is about to say. Don't ever finish other people's sentences. And when you speak to people, listen very carefully, give them your full attention. And finally, if somebody questions you, I would say don't be defensive. So if they are questioning you, or if they are even sort of telling you that you could have done something better as a client, listen very carefully and don't be defensive about it. So that is the end of the presentation set. We can always look at certain sections of the presentation later, but I will take you back to the first, to the ICICI Lombard case study that that I had laid out, and I would like to discuss that with you today. Has everyone had a look at the case study? Have you all understood what was expected of you? Does anyone have any questions? And then we can start to see this case study. Okay, very good. Um, did you find it easy, difficult? Any observations? So I think let's begin. Let's begin by reading the text very carefully. So what we're seeing is we picked up the red herring prospectus of ICICI Lombard, and now you have been recruited by ICICI Lombard General Insurance, and the head of direct sales has recruited you. So the reason we are doing this is to give you an idea of how to set up a P&L account for a business unit, to be able to say how this business unit will perform. So now the company decides to open a branch of ICICI Lombard in your hometown. You have been offered a position to head that branch, and before leaving from Mumbai, your boss gives you the following charts to read. So let's read the first one. It says that insurance penetration as a percentage of GDP in India is extremely low compared to uh, around the world. So the world average is 2.8%. In India is 0.77%. So how do we compare to developed markets like the US? Very high. Japan is a bit below the world, and Asia, generally speaking, is lower than world averages. So Japan, China. Hello, hi. So we see the first chart clearly tells us that India is below the world average and even below Asian sort of uh, uh, benchmarks. Then we look at the uh, sheer amount of, in fact, the amount of money that is paid premium per capita, the amount. So I believe India pays something like 13 US dollars per person as insurance. That is very little compared to maybe if you look at America, it's 2,400 US dollars per person. Um, then let's look at this. This is the main chart that I had wanted you to all consider quite carefully. So what we're saying is that this is the overall size of the non-life insurance business in India, and this is the breakdown of the private insurers and the public insurers is here. So let us begin now and see what were the questions. Then we have laid out the types of insurances that are sold. The sales head calls you in a meeting room and wants to discuss your sales strategy for your hometown and create a sales plan for your hometown. So what are the objectives that he wants? He says that the branch should be profitable by the end of the year, and that he gives you an idea that historically insurance has been maybe 25% margin business, which means that of all the money that you receive, maybe about 75% would be paid down, would be paid either as claims or as expenses within your organization. So the company may have a net margin of 15%. And if you sell through a corporate agent or a sales agent, you will have to give them 10% commission straight away. So the sales head also tells you that insurance claims, for example, if an insurance policy is signed today, so maybe 6 to 9 months ke andar, you will have a claim on the policy. So the first question was, does this information matter at all to your business planning? Yes, no. Justify your answers. So I will wait for you guys to respond to this answer. I'm simply taking you to this part of the case study, which and I'm telling you how I would attack the problem. But I would leave all of you to also think about how you have done it, and feel free to send me your responses. So the basic idea is to create a 12-month sales plan, and from Jan 2018, create a business plan for your new branch and realistic salaries for staff and sales targets. Um, so what is the best result that he expects from us? He says that you, as a branch, should have at least 5 people in the company, in your branch, and the branch itself should be profitable on a standalone basis. So this is what we had said. There are some fixed costs and some variable costs that have been laid out. I presume all of you have read this. And then finally, we say that insurance is a form of risk mitigation, which means that any prudent insurer will not write only one type of insurance. Usually they will write different types of insurances so that थोड़ी सी hedging हो जाए. So this is basically it. And then we have simply asked you questions as to how you're going to motivate your staff, and what you can offer in terms of non-monetary motivation, what you can offer in terms of monetary motivation. So a basic thing is to fill out this chart now to say what would be the claims ratios, how much would be the salaries, how much would be profits, etc. So our first step, I would say, is to come up with a chart such as this. And I have done this, and I would expect all of you to do this as well. So first we say what are the revenues and what are the expenses, and we lay out a 12-month period, which is starting Jan to December. I hope all of you can see this very clearly. So we first lay out a table from Jan to December, and then we say, okay, how much is the market share of, we sort of look at how, as an insurance company, you can get revenues. So our first step is to say that what are the different types of insurances, and these are the types of revenues that we may have. So what are the different types of revenues? We see that motor is 11% for private insurers and 7% for public insurers. So about 18%. So we go here. We have a rough idea of the market share of 18% motor own damage. Next is motor third party. So we say motor third party is 9% for private insurers and 11% for public insurers. So that would be about 9 plus 11, 20%. Yes. Third point, we see crop insurance. Crop insurance, we can see our agri is done by three different segments: 8%, plus 2%, plus 6%. So about totally 16%. Then next we look at health. Health is 7% here, 16% here, and 4% here. So about 27% of the insurance market is health related. So it's a very high percentage. Finally, we look at fire insurance, and we can see that fire insurance is 4% here, another 4% here. So this adds to about 8%. We put that aside. Then we say marine insurance. Marine insurance is 1% and 1%, which is about 2% of the overall sum. So we put 2%. Finally, there's the others, and others would include 2% plus 5% plus this little percentage here. Now, there was a rounding error in this data, so the total sum adds up to about 99.2%. So we've just taken that others is the balancing figure, and it's about 9%. So now we know that the overall market is defined by these product categories, and our revenue has to come from within this number. We also know that roughly health will give us 27% of our revenues. Motor third party will give us 20% of our revenues, or another 18%. So about 38% of the insurance market will come from motor insurance, which would mean motor insurance for cars, for buses, etc. So this is step one. Step one would also involve that we lay out our fixed expenses and variable expenses. So what would our fixed expenses be? The first one would be the rental of the office. The second step would mean that we set up the costs. Setup costs, which would mean things such as we have spoken about it here. Yes, this is the number that I was wanting to show you. Um, Administrative support, uh, computers, printer, telephone, and 50,000 rupees at the start of the year for your branch. So you have to pay this as a setup cost. Besides this, every time you add a staff, you will have to pay 10,000 rupees to buy a work desk and 25,000 for a laptop. So, so this would be all setup costs, cleaning and administration, etc. उसके बाद after that salaries that you will pay to your staff. These are another set of expenses. So the uh, uh, group head had given us the possibility to hire 5 staff. So for the moment, I've kept A, B, C, D, E as my employees. Finally, I have the possibility to have like to get an agent, and so we can appoint corporate agents in a new city where maybe there aren't any. So we say there could be agency commissions that we'll be paying. And after that, in fact, the main reason for an insurance company to exist, which is to pay claims. And finally, after subtracting all these expenses, we will have a profit. So this would be our step one. So step one is to simply determine what is the biggest opportunity which we've done here by seeing market share, and what are the expenses that we will incur, which we've done here. Now let us move a little bit forward to step two. What would happen once we flesh out the opportunity a bit more clearly? So we say that motor insurance. I will just snap between. This is motor own damage and motor own damage, which can be sold either through agency or through direct. Similarly, motor third party sold through agency or through direct. Finally, we say crop insurance. Now, for me as a person, I come from New Delhi. So, in my city, there will not be any crop insurance, but I've given you some numbers. If you're from a city which has a lot of agricultural produce, then crop insurance would be a very big target for you. So, for me, I've already made these numbers zero because I know I'm not going to receive any revenues for crop insurance sitting out of New Delhi. Then we look at health. Health, we know, is one of the largest fields, which we said was 27% of all insurance sold in India is health insurance. So we may sell health insurance through an agency or through direct. Now, an agency would mean that I can appoint sales staff, and they will receive purely a percentage for all the sales that they do on my behalf. In this case, I am not having to pay for the salary unless there is a sale. But the moment I have a sale, I will have to uh, pay their agency commission. So we say we set up an agency or direct. Finally, we say I had given a small hint here in the case study, which is to say health and fire is usually sold to corporates. And we said that each corporate will have an insurance budget of about 2,50,000 rupees. But you can only have one corporate sales made by one sales executive in 2 months. That means maximum in an year, अगर आपके पास 5 staff हैं, you may be able to sell about 10 policies, 10 insurances of so much premium. So this is our corporate, and I say this is health and fire. So we lay this out. Finally, marine. I would say marine is 1% of my of the overall insurance in the country. So it's not a target area for me if I have an office of 5 people. So I will just blank it out and say that I'm not going to focus too much on this. Uh, so I just say, yeah. Yeah. So हमने marine को 0 कर दिया. Finally, others, we will discuss about that, whether we want to sell others through direct sales or through an agency channel. So I would like all of you to consider what would be a good sales channel for or an agency channel for motor insurances. And I'll come to it in the next few moments, but I would like to leave it, would like you to consider. उसके बाद now in this case we start laying out our step 2 is we start laying out our expenses very quickly and very easily. We know that expenses are easier to determine because we have a better idea कि हमारे को कितना. Hello, hi. So we know that expenses are much easier to determine because we have no idea of how sales will be, but we certainly have a better idea of how expenses can be determined. So our second step will be simply to lay out our expenses in our mind कि हमारे को कितने expenses आएंगे पूरे साल में. So our first step will be, we know that office rental is a sure expense. So we look at what is the amount that we have been given as a budget to spend. So we know that our office expense is 40,000 rupees. So we lay it out for all the 12 months from Jan to December. We know office expenses got to be 40,000 rupees. Next, we look at what would be the setup costs. So our first setup cost is the branch pays 50,000 rupees at the start of the year to set up computers, printer, telephone, Wi-Fi, whatever. So we set up 50,000 rupees straight away. So why have I added another 35,000 rupees here as an expense? So we yes, we said that every time you add a staff to your branch, you will pay 10,000 for a work desk and 25,000 for a laptop. So in the first month itself, without any sales, I've already incurred an expense of 50,000 rupees to set up the office and 35,000 rupees to buy a computer, etc. for myself. So that's our first expense. Now, again, for the moment, I'm just thinking that if I were to be able to hire 5 staff and each of them would be able to give me this 2,50,000 rupees of sales, one in every 2 months, then the sooner you bring more staff, the quicker you can sell. So we put down we say that as soon as I join my office, I start working towards getting sales so that I can hire more people every 2 months. So I then start laying out that if I join the office in Jan, by March, hopefully I'll get one more person in. Similarly, after another 2 months, in May, I'll get a third person in. By July, a fourth person, and by September, a fifth person. So that is how my rollout will be. Then we think about other expenses. So we say that cleaning and administration would cost us 10,000 rupees a month. So we lay it out. Now again, I have added another 2,000 rupees as expense here. And the reason I said so is that for each of your staff, you will incur 2,000 rupees per cell phone per month. Now, even though it's actually in the case study shown as a variable cost, but in fact, 2,000 rupees is a fixed cost. The reason I've put it in variable is because sometimes you will have, uh, as staff starts to increase, they will be calling each other and they will be sometimes, depending on the business that you take in, they will be on the phone more often. So it will soon start to change from a fixed cost to a variable cost, depending on how much business you have. But tentatively, I'd sort of said that even though I've clubbed it into the variable costs, it's uh, it has a component of both. So now here we say that we added 10,000 rupees for cleaning of the office or administration, and we added another 2,000 rupees for the cell phone for the first uh, sales staff cell phone. So again, we follow this discipline of saying 12,000, again 12,000. In the month of March, a new employee joins me, so my cell phone bills increase by another 2,000 rupees, so it becomes 14,000 rupees. The in May we add another staff, so it becomes 16,000 rupees. Similarly, July and August we have uh, one more staff joining us, 18,000 rupees, and finally at September, and from then on, our uh, our administrative expenses, including cell phone bills, will cap out to 20,000 rupees. So we've put that out. Now let's say I were to give myself a salary of say 75,000 rupees, or I want to pay myself that. So I put that out as my salary as branch manager. So I've done that for 12 months. Again, I look at person B's salary, who would be my second in command, and I would give him a salary of 60,000 rupees starting March. So we put these numbers out for him from March unto December. Now we have a third employee joining us, and we put down his salary. And finally, we have two very junior employees, and these are their salaries, 35,000 each. For the moment, there are no other variable expenses in terms of either agency commissions. There are also claims, and at the moment, I haven't bothered to calculate a profit. So this would be my step 2. So just to recap this very easily, I detail out the sales channels. Whom do I want to sell through? And for motor, I will just come to it in a moment as to whom I'm going to sell insurance through. Crop, I'm not going to do at all. Marine, I'm not going to do at all. And say others, I can't figure out what the product is. So for the moment, I just say not going to do at all. So now I have a firm idea that I'm going to only look at these following sets of revenues. Motor, both own damage and third party, which accounts for 38% of the market share, and health and fire, which accounts for 35% of the market share. So now, going back to step 2. In step 2, we decide to detail out the sales channels, and we lay out the expenses that we know are likely to we are we are incurring. So step 3 would mean that we now decide to see if we were to put in these sales channels, like an agency channel or a direct sales channel, how would our numbers stack up? So let's look at purely the numbers for February. In this situation, we say that we have tied up now. In the first month, we have tied up with a car showroom, and that sold 20 new cars in 1 month. And we had said that each new insurance sold, each motor policy would be a contract of 5,000 rupees, and motor third party would be 2,000 rupees, but that is mandatory. You may not buy motor own damage, but you have to buy motor third party insurance. So here in cell number C3, I now say that if I've tied up with a car showroom and they sold 20 cars in 1 month, they'd be able to get a gross premium of 100,000 rupees through this car sales. So we have 100,000 written here, and that was own damage. And for third party insurance, they pay 2,000 rupees because that is mandatory. So we are able to sell insurance worth 1,40,000 rupees for the first month that we enrolled them as an agent. Now, in this case, we had said that as soon as we enlist an agent, we will have to pay agency commission. So agency commission in this case would be 10% of 1,40,000 rupees, which is 14,000 rupees. So I've already incurred that expense in February itself. Finally, we said that an insurance written in the first 6 months will likely have a claim in the 6th to the 9th month. So let's see where we had written that down. Sorry, I see. Did I miss it? Yeah. So we have said that in the case study, the sales head tells you that the claim of insurances usually follows in a 6 to 9 month period. That means insurance sold in January will likely have a claim in the third quarter, July to September. So what happens is that we received 1,40,000 of insurance premium from our agent, the corporate agent that we enlisted, and of that 1,40,000, 14,000 was paid back to the corporate agent as agency commission. And finally, 6 months from now, so Feb, March, April, May, June, July, August. In August, we start receiving claims for this insurance that we had written. So I have calculated that amount to be, it should actually be 65% off. I hope you are all following what I'm doing. So yes, I have written that down. Insurance claims ratio may be assumed to be 65%. So it should actually be 0.65 of this number. So that would be our claims that we have paid. Now, so I have one rough idea of 1 month of revenue and activity and how my profit and loss statement is looking like. So next step would be to start filling out revenues for the entire month. So at this point in time, I will actually leave this exercise to all of you, and I am not going to do any more because I would like all of you to attempt it from here on. I have given you an idea of what I would like to do, or what I'd like you to do. So I hope it has become adequately clear, and I will, after this, leave the case study with all of you, and I will ask you to complete the case study. So now I would like to just go back. Last time I had shared my video a little bit late. So I would like to ask if any of you had missed that video, if you would like me to repeat anything, or if not, if I would like to actually leave the session for you guys to consider. And if you have any questions or any feedback, any suggestions, anything that you'd like me to repeat, then we can go back to those particular slides. Please feel free to come in and let me know what you're thinking. Any suggestions, any questions, feedback, anything at all. So, um, does anyone have any questions? Or if not, then we can actually stop for today. And I would invite all of you to spend a little bit extra time with your case studies, because I've displayed what I want you to do. And I would like you to spend some time with your Excel sheets. Think about how much business you have to bring in, how many resources you would have, and then we can continue this case study in our final session next week. I have given you some general direction along which I would request all of you to follow. So would you all be able to attempt this case study now? And would you be able to, uh, 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 you have a clear idea of what you're expected to do? Okay, lovely. Thank you. So in that case, what we can do today is we can wind down today. I think we have covered a lot of ground. I've covered all the slides, and and I hope to see you all next week. And I hope that you'll all be able to attempt all the case studies and all the questions. And I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and just go out and enjoy yourselves also. Please, yes. Hi, Akshat. Please tell me. Ah, if you notice, I had if you want to, you can uh, please be as realistic as possible. The idea is to give you all a perspective of a team manager and how to budget for expenses and sales revenues. Uh, this is just a simple Excel based exercise. Be as creative as you can. Yes, so my suggestion is that you can go ahead and be as creative as you can within your Excel sheets. But your my suggestion is that you should actually the way you go about thinking about your business. So first, you try and figure out how overall how will you get revenues. Then you try and figure out what are your costs that you have to incur to get those revenues. And then when you start feeding in every number, you'll start to understand ki, okay, how much time and effort do I have to focus on each of these things. I would like to take you back for an instance to that Excel sheet that we had developed. So in this Excel sheet that we had developed, I've only put down the revenues for one particular product, and through one sales channel, you will start putting out the revenues for all the products that you think you can manage from your branch. Please feel free to add in, and you will uh, later start putting out claims as well. So जब आप ये सब चीजें कर लेंगे, you will have a very fine idea of uh, how your branch is performing. And one thing that I would like to take you back and remind you is that Huh. So one thing that I would like to remind you after doing all this exercise is that if you want to cross check whether what you've done is correct, you should finally look at an idea of how much business you are generating in each of these business categories, and they should be in line with these market shares. If they are not in line, then it means that you are probably have done something wrong or you have missed some point of view. You may be overestimating how much business you can get from one business category. So for all the work that you are doing, always cross check your assumptions and think about what you're doing correctly, what you might be able to do better, things like that. So this is how I would request all of you to attempt it. And uh, again, I'm open for any further questions or any requests. If you want me to repeat anything, we still have time on our hand. So please let me know. So I presume that there are no other questions from the audience. In that case, what we'll do is we will close out today's session, and we will meet next week. And I will leave this time to you to work on your case studies, and we will meet next week. Thank you all for coming, and I don't see any other questions. So I thank you all for coming, and we meet next week. If there are any requests in terms of repeating anything or any suggestions or anything at all, please feel free to let me know. Um, Thank you so much. Good evening, and Merry Christmas to all of you.